Welcome, Magnus here. If you're new, consider subscribing to my channel. But today we're going to talk about the R5C. R5C being a camera that is going to be like the R5, but take away a lot of those limitations that the R5 had for all this time. So let's just jump right in. Now, I recently saw a video from Tony Northrup basically talking about the upcoming R1, which would be Canon's flagship camera, and then the R5C, which is meant to be a video-centric version of the R5. So R5 is kind of more of the photo-centric version, and then the R5C will be a cinema-centric version. Now, Tony Northrup had a lot of theories about kind of what the specs and what the price would be. Now, based off of his predictions, which I actually do believe that they actually have merit, I had thought about it, and I thought about this for a while, and I've come to the conclusion that the R5C will not replace my R5. If I get another camera, I would potentially consider actually getting an R5 versus an R5C. Now let me explain why, and I'll hit you with my key points. First, what's the difference between the R5 and the R5C rumored? And again, I'm going off of Canon rumors and Tony Northrup's video. Basically, the differences is that you're not going to get any overheating in the R5C because it'll have internal fans. It's going to be a bigger body, and it also does away with the recording limit. As far as anything else, it seems to be pretty standard. It's going to record the same resolutions, 4K 120, 4K 60, but it might actually have an oversampling of the 4K 60 and potentially the 4K 120 so that you get a little bit more detail when you record those higher frame rate and high res modes, which would be actually really cool. So the R5C does do 4K 60, 4K 120, but it just kind of does like a line skipping. It's not the greatest high-speed 4K. In fact, the R6 does better 4K 60 than the R5. It captures higher detail. And even the Sony a7S III does better 4K 120 when it comes to the detail that it can capture than the R5. So then with those differentiators, what else does this camera offer? Don't know. They'd have to offer a couple of more interesting quirks. Another rumor spec would be like that redesigned hot shoe mount so that you can actually have microphones that connect electronically to your camera, and then you don't have to have a wire connected to the side of your camera, which is great. Okay, a couple of nice features here and there, no overheating and no recording limit. Stuff that at least when it comes to the recording limits, that stuff could be removed by firmware. So what's the price? Well, again, nothing confirmed, but Tony's figuring it might be close to $10,000, slightly under, but $10,000. So $10,000 for a couple of handful of features. I don't see that happening. I think the C70 itself, which is pretty expensive, doing 4K 60, 4K 120 in a smaller sensor, but it's really great dynamic range and it's codecs that actually work amazing. I think that's a better buy. And I would actually consider that before getting an R5C, which is an overpriced R5 with couple of things that should have been there from the get-go. And the R5, especially when it comes to the overheating limitations, are few and far between from a full production standpoint. And I'm fine with the workaround. For example, I had a professional shoot this weekend, and in that professional shoot, I decided to record 4K at 60 frames per second for most of the video. The parts that I didn't record 4K 60 was because I was recording 8K RAW. So it was all of the modes that basically overheat this camera. And the camera never overheated on me. Again, as I've explained many times. Now, this was a full day, full production shoot, and I was recording on and off, but I was recording all day. And some of the shoot was outside, and it is getting pretty cold around here in the New York City area. So you can say that it helped a lot that when filming outside, it was freezing. So overheating was just not a worry. But half the day was indoors. And half the day indoors recording at 4K 60 also did not worry about overheating because the warning never even came up. I recorded all that footage and it was amazing. R5 did not fail me whatsoever on a professional shoot. Now, if I had a longer recording shoot, which I have one coming up, actually, I've got a wedding to do next year. That shoot, I'm actually going to record the full day in 60 frames per second. It will be warmer because it's in the warmer season. However, I will record 4K 60 for most of the day. And if it gets close to overheating, I'm going to take it down a notch and record 1080p at 60 frames per second because I care more about the frame rate than I do about the resolution. And when it comes to outputting for my client, they don't really care about 4K versus 1080. They just want the video. And when it comes to that, wouldn't worry about overheating. But we'll see if I even need to use 1080p at all, because again, my experience with 4K 60 has been pretty well so far. So these are personal experiences for me. For my uses and my experience using the camera in itself, I have not worried about overheating. So that's out the window. Moving on, recording limit. It's frustrating that the R5's recording limit of 30 minutes still exists. I did a video previously that complained about it, but quite honestly, Canon's doing that for a reason. Like I said, the R5C, they want to keep their cinema line as the cameras that don't have any recording limits. Competition has moved on well past that. I'm recording on Blackmagic, no recording limits, but those are cinema cameras. But then I have a Panasonic GH5, no recording limit. Although it does great video, it's a photo camera. You know, it's meant for that. So that 30-minute limit is archaic, and Canon does it for a reason, because they want to differentiate. It's dumb. I mean, Sony got rid of that differentiation a long time ago, so they don't care. And Canon still has it. So then I got to think about, for my productions, is it something that I absolutely need? Well, no recording limits is nice, but I won't worry about the recording limit hampering what I'm doing, because granted, it would be nice if I had it, but if I need to record a longer shoot, unfortunately, I'm just going to use one of my other cameras. Now, if I had it in the Canon body, would I use the Canon? Sure, but I'm not going to pay almost double the price of an R5 just to have the recording limit removed. So Canon's strategy of saying, hey, we're differentiating our cinema brand versus our mirrorless camera brand and splitting them into two is not helping them any, because what am I doing? I'm saying, hey, I'm going to stick to another brand when it comes to filming these type of scenarios, and not Canon. And that's where I think they're wrong, and they could potentially lose a lot of customers. Or maybe some customers might want to say, hey, the R5C is worth it because it has no recording limit, and I love the R5. Great, but there are cameras available now for a lot cheaper that'll give you raw recording and no recording limit. Or you can say, hey, if you want that in the R5 to get that 8K, you could put an Atomos Ninja 5 or Atomos Ninja 5 Plus on top of this camera and then get no recording limit for a lot cheaper than buying a whole new camera. So there's different options, and most of them are not giving Canon money. So why are they sticking to that principle? I'm sorry, but I'm not buying the whole differentiating brand excuse. Not that saying that they were ever using that as an excuse, but it's the theory, and I don't buy it. Which kind of brings me to the final reason on why I won't upgrade to it. It's really the price. The price in itself, or the theorized price, being so close to almost 10 grand is ridiculous for just a couple of new features. That camera better do a lot more, like improve the dynamic range, but they're not going to change the sensor from what I heard. And this oversampled 4K 60 or 4K 120, though it sounds great, it's not something critical that I feel that I would be missing out on if I didn't have those higher fidelity camera modes. So from that in itself, it's not worth the price of double the money. And if the camera body is kind of like this, or a little bit bigger, it's still not attractive. A lot of cinematographers want kind of like an adaptable square camera that has a lot of different high-end ports, SDI, full-size HDMI, which again, that's rumored to have full-size HDMI, but I'm not one of those who really cares about a full-size HDMI. Again, in that project that I was recording this past weekend, I had my R5 connected to an HDMI transmitter, and I was using the port so a co-director was actually able to see what I was viewing as I filmed and able to give his tweaks and adjustments, which worked off of the port. I had no issues. It didn't fall out or pop out. Yeah, that could happen if you have an accident, but that can happen with any other cable as well, including full-size HDMI, unless you have something to lock it in there, which I didn't. I was very careful, and like I said, I haven't had trouble with the port. I know many others have, but it hasn't been an issue for my recordings, and I've been using this camera for about a year now, and it's been good. So full-size HDMI port is not going to get me into the Canon camp, but that price tag of so many thousands of dollars more for a couple of hidden features that you couldn't already do most of on the R5 themselves. So overheating is not a thing. When you hook up an Atomos Ninja. 30-minute time limit is not a thing when you hook up an Atomos. Higher fidelity 4K 60 and 4K 120, not really needed. Or you can get an R6 if you want higher fidelity 4K 60. Or go to a Sony a7S III. There are different options that are a lot cheaper than a really expensive cinema camera, just with a couple of little bit more features. Sony A1 lets you do 8K 30 without overheating. Like, where are we at? The Nikon Z9 will let you do 8K at 60 frames per second, which I believe it's theorized is going to be a lot less expensive than what the theoretical R5C will be. So I don't see how Canon would have an advantage there. So price-wise, doesn't make any sense. So that's my opinion on the R5C and why I am not looking to get it. I thought about it because I'm like, it would be nice to have a Canon that really does it all, right? A Canon that takes away the limitations, keeps the small form factor, and we could run with it. But then upon using it this weekend, like I said, happy with my purchase. That's just my commentary on the R5C and what I think its relevance will be going forward. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And as always, like, share, and you can make my day when you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.